Gabriela Spanic stood frozen beneath the white studio lights as the director called for silence. In that breathless second before the cameras rolled, she felt the weight of every no she had ever heard, every door that had closed in her face, every whispered doubt that said she was never enough. Then the clapper snapped shut, and she stepped forward anyway. She had not always been this fearless. Years earlier, Gabriela was just a girl from a modest home, carrying a dream too big for the room she grew up in. Her mother believed in her quietly, the kind of belief that showed up as ironed clothes and packed lunches, while the world outside was louder and crueler. People saw her accent before her talent, her background before her discipline. Auditions ended with polite smiles and empty promises. Each rejection chipped away at her confidence, but somehow never at her resolve. Her first real break came with conditions attached. The role was small, the schedule brutal, and the pay barely covered rent. Worse, she was cast opposite someone who seemed determined to remind her of her place. Long hours turned into subtle insults, and subtle insults into open hostility. Gabriela went home many nights with tears on her pillow, wondering if this was the price of chasing a dream. The challenge was not just to perform, but to endure without losing herself. Instead of fighting back with bitterness, she chose excellence. She learned her lines until they lived inside her. She listened, observed, absorbed. When she finally spoke on screen, there was a depth in her eyes that no one could ignore. The role ended, but something shifted. Casting directors began to remember her name, not as a risk, but as a promise. Success, when it arrived, did not come gently. Fame amplified everything. Praise grew louder, but so did criticism. One project in particular pushed her to the edge. She was asked to play two opposing characters in the same story, one driven by love, the other by jealousy and rage. The emotional toll was immense. On set, she was celebrated. Off set, she felt fractured, struggling to separate herself from the darkness she portrayed. At the same time, her personal life began to unravel. A relationship she trusted cracked under the pressure of public scrutiny and private misunderstandings. Betrayal arrived quietly, disguised as reassurance, until the truth could no longer be ignored. Gabriela faced a painful crossroads. She could cling to what was breaking her, or walk away into uncertainty. Walking away was the hardest thing she had ever done. For months, she disappeared from the spotlight. Rumors filled the silence, but the truth was simpler. She was healing. She returned to her roots, spent time with family, and relearned who she was when no one was watching. The challenge here was not external, but internal. Forgiving herself for staying too long, for trusting too deeply, for confusing love with endurance. When she came back, she did so on her own terms. She chose projects that resonated with her values, stories that reflected resilience rather than despair. One role in particular mirrored her journey so closely it felt like destiny. She played a woman who loses everything and rebuilds her life with dignity and courage. The performance was raw, restrained, and unforgettable. Audiences did not just watch her, they felt her. The industry, once skeptical, now stood in admiration. Awards followed, but Gabriela measured success differently now. It was in the letters from viewers who found strength through her characters. It was in the young actors who approached her, saying they stayed because her story reminded them not to quit. Yet even at the height of her career, new challenges emerged. Health scares forced her to slow down. The fear of losing everything again crept back in. This time, she listened to her body, chose rest without guilt, and learned that strength also meant knowing when to pause. Recovery taught her balance, something she had never allowed herself before. Years passed, and Gabriela became more than a star. She became a symbol of perseverance. Not because her life was perfect, but because it was honest. She spoke openly about failure, about starting over, about the courage it takes to remain kind in an unforgiving world. Her story reminded people that success is not a straight line, but a series of choices made in the dark, guided by hope. On the day she returned to the same studio where she once stood trembling, the lights felt different, warmer. She smiled as the camera rolled, not out of nervousness, but gratitude. She had faced rejection, betrayal, exhaustion, and fear. Each challenge had tried to reshape her, and in resisting, she had found her true form. Gabriela Spanic's journey was never just about fame. It was about believing in yourself when no one else does, about walking away from what harms you, and about returning stronger, not hardened by the fight. Her story leaves behind a simple, powerful truth. Dreams do not belong to the fearless. They belong to those who are afraid and choose to move forward anyway.